Yes.
The meeting will now continue. I'd like to have approval for the minutes.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion is carried. Any additions, deletions, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner, first thing, we would like to arrange the agenda, and that is to take I-5, approval of resolution, member dues for Transportation Planning Agency. First, since we have a guest speaker that is on a tight schedule. Also, we would like to add I-7, request for proposal mobile food services provided.
Also, under community grants,
I'm sorry,
I would like,
No, go ahead, it's your.
I'd like to pull Suncoast Community High School. Okay, thank you. Any others?
That's it.
All in favor of the changes? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Consent agenda? All in favor, Mr. Amir?
Yes.
I need a motion. I need a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay.
And then if we can make a motion on the one that you removed separately, that was for development, that second, you pulled that from the consent, correct?
That was from F9, community grants.
Yeah, community grants.
I need a motion for
So what was it that you were doing with that?
that. I was going to give a donation of $100.
It's already on. You already got it on?
No, she's
No.
changing, making the change.
Oh.
I'm making a change in that.
So you're adding,
Madam Chairman, I'm glad you pulled this item because I was going to pull it myself. Question, we have these community grants, which I have some issues with anyway, the $2,000 for commissioner. But we get requests from all sorts of organizations, many of whom or most of whom don't really have any bearing on the poor. If we're going to do this every year, I'd like to see us take the $10,000 and use it in our host city for young people and make a real difference. Maybe, go from high school to high school or school to school. But we have so many requests, and they're all wonderful organizations, and I wish we had a lot more money so we could give it. But when the budget comes up in a couple of months, I would just like the board to think about that. Maybe we could be more effective with that if we used it in our host city and really made a difference rather than the way we've been doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAlpin. I just want to make a comment to that. The problem I see in that, on the other hand, is that the Port of Palm Beach district is 14 municipalities. And although we are located in the city of Riviera Beach, and I live here myself, I think it would not, I think we would have some issues on that because they would say, hey, you're supporting one of the cities, one of the 14 in the port district, and you're not even considering any requests that we have from any of our other cities. So I think that would give us a problem. I don't know how the other commissioners feel about that, but I think that would be opening a can of worms. So that's just my comment. When it comes to Suncoast Community High School, back to that, I would like to donate $100 to be added to the other two commissioners.
For approval of F9.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we're going to go into executive report.
District report.
District reports. Commissioners, I would like to start off by providing an update on last night's Riviera Beach. We're going to start with that first. Riviera Beach City Council meeting. As I've spoken to a few of you, Jeff Gannon, interim planning and zoning director, presented our agenda item and would have allowed the annex property to be incorporated in the port. The council listened to this presentation, which is one of two, and the two members, one prior to the meeting and one during the meeting, suggested and requested that both port and members of the council have a meeting to discuss part 2 of the interlocal agreement, which will include the annex property usage and other items such as Vertex and Stone Rock. Let me stop there for 1 second and let you know that Stone Rock is in town, that's Stuart Kroll, and he's meeting with the city, not only a council person, but also the assistant city attorney. So that is moving along. With respect to Vertex, we learned that Vertex has submitted the permits, and we confirmed that the permits are in Jeff Gagnon's office. He just has not had a chance to evaluate it. So, should we decide to go that route, then my recommendation is that Michael Busha, Treasurer Coast Regional Planning Council, coordinate and chair this meeting. And if our board decides to move forward with the meeting. So in effect, I'm asking, the request is being made by the city. I have had conversations with a few of you. Perhaps we should discuss it further.
Mr. Sickman?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of trying to finalize it interlocal, but I mean, the last meeting we had was 3 years ago. So that's fine, we can go ahead and do that, but all the port needs that are coming up and have been in front of the city for years now, and putting us way back, we have to get these approved, whether there's an interlocal, agreement now or a year from now. So we all want to have an interlocal, but it can't have anything to do with, what we've got in front of the city that's been there for years. So I think if everyone agrees that we need to tell the city that we definitely do want an interlocal, but we can't stop all our projects waiting for that because the last meeting was, 3 years ago?
2015.
2015.
Commissioners, Richards?
I fully agree. I love the idea of having an interlocal agreement. It addresses numerous issues. So please push hard for that meeting. However, we do not want the business of the port to be on hold any longer, any further. We don't want to say, oh, it's okay, we'll wait for this meeting to occur, and then when that happens, sometime after that, we'll move forward on our applications, which have been pending for many months, if not years. So Les, please, go forth with the meeting, but do not slow down, and I'm not willing to wait for the meeting. No, this is the standard application. Please process it.
Any other comments? I agree with, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I just wanted to suggest that you try to set up a meeting between yourself, the city manager, city administrator, and maybe Tanya Davis Johnson. She's been very helpful. I don't think they understand the impact of waiting. And I think if you can explain it to them, I think they'll agree that there's no reason to hold those items up.
It's a good idea.
I would also like to add, in the interlocal agreement, did they write it up, Mr. Pickens? Who wrote it up? Did they write the interlocal agreement up?
From what we were told, the draft that came over here was written by Mr. Busha. Am I
Okay.
pronouncing that?
Bush.
I would like to see the Port of Palm Beach do our draft. And I think the best way to do this whole thing, this is my opinion, is that their draft, then we have a draft, then we need to give them theirs, they give us ours, we work on it, then we get together as a meeting and have a meeting to go through each item one by one. Now that would take a long time. One meeting is not gonna get it. So we're talking about a process, step by step, and I think it's gonna take a while before we get there, but I would like to see the port for us to do our thing and then combine it. Or if you think it'll be too costly or too much time, then if we take theirs and just go through it and just write ours in. and then give it back, but it still has to go back to them before we meet as a team to have a discussion. And also, I think when we met 3 years ago, I don't think we got much accomplished, to be honest and truthful. I think we were like all over the place. So I think it should be a set agenda and items, and go down to 1, 2, 3.
And I would think one of the parties should draft it, as opposed to the mediator. You know, the parties are kind of intimate with what the issues are and what the problems have been, and how to work together going forward, as opposed to. So I was a little surprised that when it did come, that it came from the mediator.
That is correct.
So I think we
That's
should,
my
I think we should be involved in drafting the agreement.
And I'll take it a step further, Commissioners. When we did meet with Michael Bush after he wrote what he wrote, it was his, quote unquote, it's my first time at it. Now it's up to the court to review it, add, subtract, and see what you guys would like to do. Then things happened, such as politicians started to change, some were not reelected, and this has been placed on a back shelf somewhere. For some reason, 2 council people, as I mentioned before, would like us to work on it, and I will be more than glad to take the suggestions made by the board and follow through. Have a meeting with their city manager, along with perhaps the chairperson,
Okay.
and let them know your feelings and just move forward.
Okay.
All right? Sure. Now, let's get back to the executive report. Of course, on April the 13th, last Friday, we had our first sailing of the Grand Classica. Those of us who had a chance to go inside of the ship, board the ship, it was a rather pleasant experience. A lot of people showed up for the luncheon, and of course, there was a ceremony. Both owners were there. They're not very good singers. Some of you remember seeing that. But nevertheless, they did the best they could, and we had a genuine grand time. I was not fortunate enough to travel or go to overnight to Bahamas and come back. Well, the ship is right outside. We'll be leaving in a couple of minutes, so we just would move right along. There have not been any, and let me make this perfectly clear, there have not been any parking issues, whereas we have been able to accommodate the added volume. They have been, we talked about some docking issues, and we had one of our largest partner here, Tropical Shipping, who have been absolutely more than accommodating. We're still working on that, and I know that Ken Hearn and I have, when they ask us what makes you lose sleep at night, well, that's one of them. So we're still working on that.
Mr. Manwa, I'm delighted that there were no parking problems, but the Classica, as you told me, was only selling at 600 passengers, I believe. If they do fill up, will we still be able to accommodate the parking with the current?
How many spot do you have in your committee? We yet to be tested, Commissioners. We're fairly confident that yes, we'll be able to accommodate. Yes, that's a reassuring yes or whatever. Thank you. All right. So those of you in the audience, is a wonderful ship, a great getaway from Friday afternoon, and you're back on Sunday having breakfast inside of the ship or in one of our nearby restaurants. So that's my shameless plug for the Grand Classica. Thank you. Moving on. Back in March, I attended the AAPA conference in Washington, D.C. In addition to attending the conferences, of course, I was also able to meet with Congressman Brian Mass and Congressman Alcee Hastings. Additionally, I was requested to join a delegation from the AAPA to meet with U.S. Senator from Washington, Patty Murray, to discuss the harbor maintenance tax. That presentation went rather well. However, there were demonstrations in the Senate building for some reason, and it was rather destructive to see how some of the active participants demonstrating were being handcuffed and taken away. So that was an experience. I can tell you, and we have seen some positive moves with our efforts. Just recently, I shared with all the commissioners a letter that we received from Congresswoman Lois Frankel's office, in which she is requesting the budget office to please keep in mind the CBP's budget must continue to be increased in order to meet the demand of additional capacity in seaports. She didn't specify Port of Palm Beach, but seaports. So that's a positive move and going in the right direction. Moving on, the AAPA third annual Port Day, believe it or not, is April 5th. Now till eternity. April 5th will be an annual Port Day in the United States. This is to recognize port contribution to jobs and the economy. The combined international sea trade moving through Western Hemisphere ports in 2016 totaled $3.01 billion in value. What else we have? Oh, there's our picture, and there's only one person without the Port Day shirt. She's right in the middle. I think this, that's Henry. All right, what else do we have? Yes. Commissioners, we have had staff while doing other jobs, but this has been one that's sort of, you start working on it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is our policy and procedure manual. We, back about now 3 months ago, we decided to update it, and we're glad that we have done that. We're almost finished with the policy and procedure manual. It was at one point 482 pages. We have since condensed that to, by adding, including tariff number 21, of course, rail tariff, employee handbook, union contract, foreign trade zone 135 schedule, and purchasing manual. So what we have worked on is a policy and procedure manual that is only about 280 pages. That we should be completing sometime in early May, and at that point we will distribute to all 5 commissioners so they can review it and provide us with comments. What else do we have? Oh, of course, and lastly, in events, this is the AAPA Capital Project Seminar in Norfolk, Virginia, of course. I will be attending the Florida Ports Council Summer Board meeting in Orlando, May 23rd. There's the AAPA Commissioner Seminar up in Montreal, Canada. And of course, looking down the road, the Florida Ports Council Board annual board meeting, which this year will be in St. Petersburg, Florida, September 5th and 6th. And let's not forget the AAPA 107th Annual Convention, which will be held in Valparaiso, Chile. Commissioners, if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer. If not, I'll pass it on to Rosette.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I represent you with the engineering report for the projects taking place at the Port of Palm Beach. I will start off with verse 17. No much activity has been performed since our last meeting in March. On the upland side, the contractor has completed the electrical manholes which allow the conduits for the shore power on the north side of the slip. They have a subcontractor working on the pavement areas, but on the last few weeks we have not seen not much movement in that sector. And on the west side, they have been working on the installation and construction of the new trench drain, which will collect all the runoff waters before they collect it before they get into the water and put it into our storm system. On the south side, we still have some to complete the surface concrete that will meet between the wellhead and the FPNL property. Borders are already in place, timber woods are already in place around the wellhead. The water side, which is our major issue right now, You must remember that we have 3 dolphin structures. On the last board meeting, we presented that the contractor had already casted for pour concrete on the middle and inner dolphin structure. And after the casting, they removed the forms, and this one of the photos that we presented to the board meeting, which looks like really arcade concrete finish. But the day after the board meeting, when it was a low tide, it was exposed some voids in the concrete, which we can actually see here. We have exposed rebar and gaps between 2 sections of the structure.
And which one is that?
This one here is the middle dolphin structure. A week after that, we managed to get an underwater camera, and we found that the inner dolphin structure also have defects on the lower section with exposed rebar in the bottom of the structure, and also an opening in one of the back walls. That wall is on the south side of the structure, and we can see also exposed rebar. The middle dolphin structure, the contractor decided to demolish it. We guess that they performed a structural engineer and decided that there's no way to fix it, but they started on April the 9th to demolish it. They did what is called a wire cut, like sewing it with a cable, and they actually started cutting sections of the structure until they exposed the areas where the concrete is around the piles. And that section is being done by hand at this point, in which they are exposing all the rebar that comes out of the piles, so they can rebuild again the structure and incorporate the existing rebar with the new rebar. This is a photo of how it looks today. They have underwater, they have divers on the underwater area they have to demolish, and on the upland side, they are working out of a floating barge. On Monday of this week, the contractor also submitted what they call a repair plan to save the inner dolphin structure. That plan is being under review by the structural engineer from AECOM. We have not received a final approval or rejection of the plan, so we hopefully will have that tomorrow or early next week.
Got a question? Sure. I know somebody from AECOM is here. Do we know that they're gonna give us a report tomorrow? I mean, Karen's here. I'd like to find out when this is coming.
Well, you can come in.
Right.
I spoke to Diane Lopez, which is one of our vice presidents. She's actually a structural engineer, and she, with another structural engineers, are the ones that are actually looking at it. She didn't have a written report, but yes, maybe you can have some information there.
It just so happened that John Corral, the Marine Structural Engineer of record, was on vacation this week when the report came out. So that's why Diana stepped in to try to get another structural engineer down in our Miami office to review it in the meantime. John will be back in the office on Monday, so at the latest, we'll get a review by him on Monday, if not before.
The review is underway. Obviously, John Corral is the structural engineer of record. He's the one that has to present the final acceptance or rejection report. But Diane and another internal structural engineer from AECOM are already completed the review, but it has to be finalized by John Corral. On the east office structure, we're still working on redesign, adding 2 additional piles in the middle. All the 4 piles are already driven. For this work, the contractor submitted a request for change order. They feel that they're entitled to additional compensation for this work. For that, they submitted a change order for additional cost of $372,000. The change order was evaluated by AECOM, and AECOM indicated that the contractor is not entitled to get compensated for the work, and at this point we're in the process of evaluating the outcome, how we will be dealing with the additional costs that need to be driven. On Tuesday, we received a schedule from the contractor in which they incorporated the work that need to be performed. By that I mean demolition of the middle of the structure, They assume that the inner of infrastructure will be repaired and driving the 2 additional parts for the east of infrastructure. With that activities incorporated in the schedule, they have a substantial completion date of August 24th. So that means that the project will actually run in 2 years and 1 month after the original completion date of the contract. You have additional questions regarding the emergency? Next project, we have the rail project. We're glad to say that the contractor received all the materials for the rail. Project will start on Tuesday, April 26th, Thursday of next week. Contractor will start with the demolition and reconstruction of spur number 1. While that spur is being repaired, we estimate to have in 30 days. The port will be allowed to continue to access the port through spur number 2. For spur number 2, we can actually go all the way to track number 2 to track number 6. So the rail activities at the port will not be affected by the construction of spur number 1. Once spur number 1 is completed and we move down to spur number 2, those construction activity will take place on non-operational hours. By that I mean during the night or Sunday. And that's the way the project has been set up, so no rail activity to the port is being affected by this project. The estimated completion date for the project as of now is by the end of July, even though the contractually has on the way to the end of August to complete it. But since all the material has been received earlier than we expected, we are pretty confident that we'll complete the project before the actual completion date. MOB, CH2M Hill completed the 100% package for the bidding process. We're gonna come out for advertisement this Sunday at the Post, and on Monday, all material for the bidding will be available for contractors to download the material from our port's website. The date for submitting bids by contractor is set to be on May 23rd. We're gonna have a week after that. We'll have a pre-bid meeting on the 30th of April for questions from the contractors. May 23rd will be the last date for submission of sealed proposals, and we will, once this being evaluated by CH2M Hill and Port staff, we will come back to the board on the June 21st board meeting for recommendation for approval of the contractor that's being selected for the project. That falls between the inside the expected dates, so we are comfortable to think that the contractor will be able to go to the city to request the permit for the project, aligned with the dates that we have in the tropical agreement and the port. Have any questions regarding the MOB?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Pinsky.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Richard Pinsky. In your book is the report for the items that were actually vetoed in Palm Beach County. There's a federal piece in there. The handout that you have is a supplement, and it actually just came out, so it lists all the monies that came to Palm Beach County. And you can see over the various pages. Of note is at the bottom of page 10. So when I tell you how much the legislature funded FSTED and funded the Seaport grants and the big ticket items at the bottom of page 10, included in those items, this is the actual breakdown that now you finally get to see how much we're eligible for. So as you just heard about the Encore Rail, 4.3 million, the Berth 1 expansion to 3 million, and the loading bridge, which I did not even know there was an application in for, I apologize, but 1.2 is in the FSTED money. So total that up, about 8 million, a little more than 8 million, and I think Mr. Zielinski said he's got the check ready to go, and we can start tomorrow. So anyway, and it may be interesting to you also just to see what other items were funded. So you wouldn't see these items necessarily in the budget as a proviso, although some are, but when you see cultural grants and FERDAP money, the rec, Parks and Rec money, now you actually get to see what was in the Palm Beach County budget. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, and so this is money that we applied for and that we are getting?
Correct. This is money that the Port of Palm Beach and your staff has told FSTED that they would like to have funded in the fiscal year. And so when that line item was approved, so now you actually are eligible to match these monies and spend them to continue these projects.
Are all these, everything on here, is it matched or just us? Or just
Some of the cultural grant money that you'll see is not a match. It's actually part of the cultural grant. Some of the Parks and Rec, the FERDAP money, that's not matched. But the aviation grants, most of the transportation grants, you'll see are all matched unless it was proviso in the budget, singled out of that line item, we want you to spend X. So most items will carry a match, but not
50%, 50/50 or 75/25, what is the match?
For these, it's 50/50, but depending on the other items, some are not matched and some have at least a 50/50, if not.
So our three.
Correct.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Now let's go to the item we pulled, which was I-5. Just as you said, there are individuals in the audience. I-5. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's on that page? Commissioner Waldron, your report?
Yeah, well, one, Nick's gonna come up and talk about the TPA thing, but Commerce Park Initiative, thank you all for signing that letter, because that's part of it. The BDB has sent a letter in support of the opportunity zones, and we're trying to get the Glades to be recognized as one of the opportunity zones in Florida. So when Governor Scott sends his list up, it's up to the federal government, it's on that list, which will allow us to have a lot of incentives and get some grant money to help push the Commerce Park along.
Thank you.
Commissioners, can we then go on to I-5, please?
Yes.
We have a guest, very well known, Nick, and I'd like to bring him up and have him explain to you who is the Transportation Planning Agency, AMPO, and he'll just expand on that. Nick?
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be with you. Again, my name is Nick Uren, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director for now the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. Recent rebranding. We were 40 years old this year, and I guess it was a midlife crisis, so we decided to change the name and the presentation to the public to make it a little more clear what our agency does. If you're unfamiliar, we are the entity that is responsible for allocating federal and state gas taxes and other transportation revenues to projects within Palm Beach County. Primarily surface transportation. We don't get to do as much with the seaport water-based movement of goods as I would like to. It's a beautiful facility you have here and a view that I never grow tired of. But we do help quite a bit with the movement on land of those goods and passengers once they arrive at your port, or we're trying to get them to your facility. The port is one of our 21 governing board members. We have 21 locally elected officials. Right now you've got Commissioner Waldron as your designated representative. I've had the pleasure of working with several of you in the time that I've been at the TPA in that capacity. Had a wonderful bike ride one afternoon with Commissioner Richards. We traveled all the way down to Boca Raton on Tri-Rail and then came back on US 1 by bicycle. Very, very ambitious journey that we took that day. Anyway, we are the entity that is trying to collaboratively plan, prioritize, and fund transportation in Palm Beach County. And we are very appreciative of the partnership with the port. We are transitioning right now to try to maximize our effectiveness as an agency, as well as to empower all of our members to lead. We are transitioning from an agency that has been hosted by Palm Beach County to an agency that will operate independently. One of the reasons we're doing that is to establish a distance from the county as the largest entity, but not the only entity with voting membership on our board, and to empower our other members to advocate for transportation investments that best serve their local interests, as well as to empower our collective members to advocate on a statewide and national level for discretionary grant funds and project funding that are available to us. The reason I'm here this afternoon is to request your approval of an authorization to participate in membership dues payments that we are now asking each of our local government members to pay on an annual basis to the agency. Most of the other members are easy to calculate because we're asking for a 10 cents per capita annual dues payment, because you don't actually have a defined population associated with the port. While you do have a district boundary, we didn't think it was appropriate to charge you on that entirety of the population within your district boundary. We're suggesting that in this request that you would make your annual dues payment based on the population of your host city. So that's my basic pitch in a nutshell. I want to keep it brief. I know you have other items on your agenda, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And again, pleasure to be with you, Madam Chair.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you. I served on the MPO before your time, and you guys do a great job. When I was on, I always wondered if we're ever if the port's got any projects that are now 30 or 40 years. Is there anything on the horizon that you are going to be able to do for us?
You know, it's an interesting conversation, and I will mention Mr. Baker is a member on our technical advisory committee who participates actively in what we should fund next kinds of conversations. I'll say that we are very interested in being a funding partner for projects that the port wants to accomplish. That the caveat is that our agency has a 5-year document that says these are the things we're going to accomplish over the next 5 years. So when you come to us with a good idea, it's not 30 to 40 years out that we can provide money, but it is 4 to 5 years out that we can provide money. So we're not as fast as some of the other funding sources that you typically pursue. What I've expressed to Mr. Baker as well as to Mr. Almira is let us be a parallel funding source to you so that you can use your short fuse funding sources to accomplish the urgent needs, and you can pipeline your capital program with additional funds from our agency in the 3, 4, 5 year time frame. I do want to make this your commission aware that we have, in the time that I've been here, our governing board at the TPA has established an annual competitive funding program. We call it the Local Initiatives Program, where any of our local governments can submit an application for funding of a locally identified transportation project in an amount up to $5 million. Those funds, if projects are selected, are available in the new 5th year of our work program. So we would love to hear what you are trying to accomplish. Submit one of those projects to us for that 5-year time frame, and let's see if we can work on something together.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Move approval.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Great.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
allowing me to be here.
Now let's go back. Old business H1, Peanut
Yes,
Island.
ma'am. Commissioners, as scheduled, we had our second roundtable discussion back on April the 1st, and I will tell you, it was well attended. We had interest from a wide spectrum and determined that the best to move forward is for Eric Hall, the Director of Parks and Recreation, to get with me to develop a framework for a small task force. Eric and I will hopefully be meeting next week, and it appears that, of course, former Commissioner Karen Marcus, who now represents the Palm Beach Civic Association, will be the head of the task force. There was general discussion of several non-traditional use for the island, but were all deemed inappropriate by our group. However, I would like to mention that the members of the Civic Association stated that they would like to see the island's function remain as is, rather than a more commercial use. Incidentally, while the meeting was going on, ironically, we received a quote from our company that performs tenting and things of that nature. And we learned that to maintain or to tent and work on those 3 facilities that we have out there, it'll cost approximately $14,000. We were of the false impression it was up in the 50s or maybe even 60,000. So they came back and said it's 14,000. So recapping, I will be meeting, I hope to be meeting with Eric Hall. We'll design this task force, offer it to Ms. Karen Marcus, and then I'm hoping that by the next board meeting, I'll be able to bring you more of our progress. Are there any questions?
Just a suggestion, it was a good meeting, it was very informative.
You were there, yes.
And there were a lot of interest in it. When we go forward with Karen as chair, I'm sure she'll know this, but if we can, let's entice Eric to get the county to offer its grant writers. They have much more professional and much more experienced grant writers than if we were to have to go out and hire grant writers. So let's see if that's one element of this process we can't get the county to assume. Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item. I1.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item H1, cleaning services, request to advertise for proposals. Based on the addition of the Grand Classica, court staff has determined that for operational efficiency and cost effectiveness, a need exists to consolidate cleaning services. Currently, staffing and materials are sourced from 9 different suppliers. Court staff is seeking to advertise a request for proposals for cleaning services that will encompass both staffing as well as supplies in an effort to streamline operations, potentially reducing costs, and ensure a clean facility, clean, safe.
Questions, discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next item,
Continue.
I2, vending machine services. In an effort to streamline services, maximize operational efficiency, again for the Grand Classica, highlighting the elegance of our terminal, providing healthy and alternative food choices, and utilizing machines that accept credit cards and debit cards.
Second. Discussion?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Let's go further. Financial, Mr. Levinsky.
I3. Commissioners, in front of you, of course, we have our audit that was conducted, of course, by our bond. And what I'd like to do is have Paul Zielinski, our CFO, make the presentation. And by the way, you're looking at my favorite page in the entire audit. It's page 85.
Page 85 basically will show the last 10 years, the fact that revenue continues to grow, and the port has made a very conscientious and successful effort in maintaining operating expenses. The comprehensive annual report was provided to you. We met with your audit committee as your appointees on April 10th. They were provided a copy of it about a week in advance. The audit was presented to them, their questions were answered. They were very effective, very inquisitive, and I appreciate your recommendations. And then a letter attesting to their acceptance of the audit has been attached to you. We are required to submit this to the Auditor General within 45 days of your accepting it. Before I begin, I wanted to thank Danny Kirchman, our controller, and all of the staff in the accounting department for the hard work they put into making this document possible and working with our auditors while maintaining their everyday responsibilities. I'm not going to take too much time because it is truly the auditor's responsibility to present the audit report. We will answer all your questions at the end. I am proud to say that once again, the port received what I consider an outstanding audit. Mr. Bennett will elaborate in just a few minutes. But before I move off to allow Mr. Bennett here, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the past year. It was a very, very positive year for the port. Tonnage decreased slightly, about 1%, but all commodities really showed increases, offset by the seasonal decline of sugar. Net operating revenue increased to $17.2 million, an increase of $500,000 from the prior year. Of this, about $400,000 was due to the multi-day cruise line. Operating expenses remained upward focused, reflected only a 1% compounded growth rate since 2008. Almost 40% of this year's increase was related to personnel costs, including a $100,000 charge that was a result of actuary calculations required by the state of Florida. Slip 3 was depreciated for a full year, and this added about another $250,000 of non-cash expense to the port, for a total of about $600,000 a year of additional depreciation. Our interest and debt-related expenses decreased by about $215,000 as a result of the bond refunding issues on the port. By the end of the year, 2017, the port had a net position of $115.5 million, an increase of over $5 million from the previous year, and an increase of $45 million since 2008. The Port of Palm Beach saw profitability continue to increase for the 6th straight year, reaching in excess of $2 million last year. This is an increase of $5.1 million in net revenue from 2008, when the port experienced a loss of $3.1 million. Operating revenues increased by $6.2 million over this time frame. Expenses before depreciation increased by only $350,000 since 2008. Continual efforts to control our expenses. However, depreciation has increased about $1 million, a direct result of the extensive capital program the port is undertaking and will continue to undertake. Perhaps the most significant accomplishment for the port relates to our cash position. By the end of 2008, the port had approximately $19 million in cash. Since that year, we have invested $25 million of our own cash in construction assets and capital assets. We've paid off $22 million worth of long-term debt. We've paid approximately $20 million worth of interest payments, used over $80 million to meet our operating needs. And in spite of this nearly $150 million cash outlay, the port has increased its cash balance to $26 million at the end of 2017. We are in excellent position to continue our capital program for those projects that are much needed by this port, as previously presented. I have to say, most organizations our size would be nothing short of envious of this position we're in and what we've been able to accomplish. Bottom line, 2017 continued to reflect the port's aggressive marketing efforts, focus on control, and a continued commitment to building and rebuilding the infrastructure of this port to meet our tenants' needs. With that, I'd like to... Sure.
Paul, how much in tax did our residents of Palm Beach Port District pay last year?
Absolutely nothing, not enough to fill up petty cash fund.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I always like to bring that out.
And it's an excellent point. We run this port as if it was an independent business. There is no tax dollars. The only thing is the grants. And basically, with the port being the way it is, we still are, like I said, we put $25 million of our own cash into these projects, so it's not totally free. But yes, there was no taxation at all.
Good, thank you.
I'd like to introduce Ron Bennett, a partner of the firm of Nolan, Holt & Minor, and Mark Escaffi, a partner with the firm of Mark Escaffi, PA. They served as the port independent auditors under a joint venture and will present the financial report for the year ended 2017.
I'm Ron Bennett.
Mark Escaffi.
Together, we would like to thank you for allowing us to serve as your auditor. We really appreciate the business. We hope we've done a good job. I know Mr. Zielinski mentioned it, but it's such an impressive number that I'd like to mention it once again. If you look at the graph on the chart there, It's on page 85 in the comprehensive annual financial report. The underlying data is on page 83. But revenues in 2008 were about 10.9 million. And in 2017, they're 17 million. And over that same time span, the expenses before depreciation and amortization, which you basically have no control over, went from 8.8 million to 9.1 million. It went up 300,000 while revenue was going up 7 million. That's a pretty impressive job of running an organization. My hat's off to him. Mr. Zelinski's talked about the numbers. Other than the ones I just talked about, I'm not going to mention numbers anymore. I'm going to talk about the role of the independent auditors. If you haven't seen the document, I know all the commissioners have a copy. Everyone else, it is now available, or soon will be, in a PDF format on the court's website, so it's available to the public at no cost. But our role as independent auditors in this is we render opinions. We provide reports. The information, the numbers, the financial statements, the introductory session, the management's discussion and analysis, the statistical section, the other supplementary information, all that's the product of the Fort Finance Department. Our contribution to this is we come in and based on our audit, we render opinions on the financial statements and on various other components. And I'll go through that. There are actually 5 reports that we have in here. You can pretty easily identify them. They have our lettering on the first page of them, so they stick out as opposed to the rest of the stuff. So those 5 reports, the first one is the independent auditor's report. It's on pages 3 through 5. And in that one, we give an opinion on the financial statements. And I'm happy to say that based on our audit, we believe that these financial statements were fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, what we call a clean opinion. Now, from there, you go to page 91 and 92. In the state of Florida, all audits of governmental entities are required to be performed in accordance with not only generally accepted auditing standards, but generally accepted government auditing standards. And part and parcel of government auditing standards is another report. And that report has a title that's about 5 lines long. But basically, it's a report on internal control and compliance. And in this one, we don't really give an opinion, but the way it comes about is when you plan an audit, you have to gain an understanding of the internal control structure sufficient to plan your audit. If you happen to come across anything that you don't think is adequate, then you're required to report that in the internal control reading. I'm glad to say we didn't find anything that's required to be reported. At the same time, because it's a governmental entity, there are a lot of compliance requirements you have with laws and regulations. We're also required to look at certain of those. And again, we didn't find any of those where there were any violations. So report number 2, you get a clean opinion. The third report immediately follows the second one. It's on pages 93 through 95. And this relates to grants. Started back in 1984, the federal government passed something called the Single Audit Act. So you have a single audit. Where that came from was originally all the federal agencies had their own audit manual. And if you got grants from 25 federal agencies, you had 25 separate audits, all under a different set of rules. And they finally concluded this was just too obstreperous, so they've come up with what's called a single audit, where you would have one audit that encompassed all of those grants under one uniform set of rules, the single audit rules. Now, not to be outdone, several years later, the state of Florida decided they would have a Florida single audit for Florida grants. And as it now stands, if you expend more than $750,000 of federal grant funds in 1 year, you have to have a federal single audit. If you expend more than $750,000 of state grant funds, you have to have a state single audit. In 2017, the port expended more than $750,000 in both, so you had a state single audit and a federal single audit. Again, we give an opinion this time, and we did give a clean opinion. However, we did have one minor finding, which you'll find on the schedule of findings and question calls on page 97 through 102. And it really had to do with administrative requirements. It was not with how the funds were spent. They were all spent appropriately. But all these grant funds come with a lot of strings attached. And it's fairly easy to miss some of these administrative requirements, especially in the last year or so, because
there's a whole new regime under the federal single audit out there. They came out with something called uniform guidance, and they changed all the rules. Well, they kind of pulled a quick one on there. We consider this to be a fairly minor instance of non-compliance with an administrative requirement. The fourth report is the management letter. In the state of Florida, all governmental audits are required to have, in the same document with your audited financial statements, a management letter as specified by the Florida Auditor General. They give you a litany of items that we have to comment on. Again, I'm glad to say here, we didn't find anything amiss that's reported there. And the very last report is an independent accountant's report on compliance with section 218.415 Florida statutes. If you're not familiar with it, that's the statute that lists the types of investments that governmental entities can invest in. Basically, we're required to go over the investments of all the governmental auditees and determine if they invested in appropriate vehicles. And we're glad to say that the board did, and again, you get a clean opinion there. So all in all, I'd like to congratulate the management staff and board for doing an excellent job. We'd like to thank them for just being very cooperative. They're a joy to work with. They're a very talented bunch. They're very professional, and we enjoy working with them. And we again appreciate the opportunity to discuss your CAFR today. If you have any questions, Mr. Scoffery and I and Mr. Slinsky would be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? I just would like to say thank you for an outstanding job. You've done an excellent job working with us through the years, and we appreciate all your work. Any other comments?
Madam Chair. I would just like to point out that when I was HR at the port, Manuel arrived, and not long after that, we had to have the largest layoffs we had ever had because of the economic turndown. But if you look at this chart, he's done a remarkable job. I doubt that there's any other organization, public or private, in Palm Beach County that can compare to this type of performance. And also, I would dispute one thing with him. The fact that things started getting better when I left the port is purely coincidental. I don't believe I had anything to do with it.
What year did you leave?
2010, at the end of the year. Anyway, thank you, Manuel. You and your staff have done an excellent job holding down costs as our revenue has continued to rise. It's just amazing. You know, maybe you should write a book on the side about how we can do that in our individual finances. It'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levinsky?
I would like to just extend a personal thanks to the board. This graph you're looking at where we held expenses flat is a phenomenal accomplishment. But we have to put that in perspective. During those lean years when we were having difficulty, through all of those years, you appreciated your staff and you allowed for pay increases in each and every year. So even though there were increases to staff's pay, we still maintained our expenses by finding other places to cut them. And on behalf of the staff, I want to thank you for your commitment to us and allowing the increases to continue year after year.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. Thank all of you. Job well done.
Thank you.
Move approval of item I3.
Second.
Motion is made. Commissioner Kusak. Waldron. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Speaking of federal
Point four? Yes.
Commissioners, a new federal requirement by the Maritime Transportation Security Act requires some biometric reads for areas next to the cruise ships. We're a little bit more ahead of the game than other seaports. It's going to have a major impact in Miami, Canaveral, and the larger cruise ports. Port staff has anticipated this requirement, having requested and received funding previously, but from the Port Security Grant Program. We currently have some ID software units that you see right there. They're about 5 years old. We're looking to utilize some of the grant money to buy some new ones so we can meet that requirement in August. Port staff is requesting commissioners to approve this purchase to ID software, who we have a contract with, in the amount of $27,740.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Thank you very
Motion
much.
carries 5-0. Thank you for all you do. Next we have
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Item I-6 is a lease for the Southgate Complex for Paradise Cruise Line. They currently are operating in this warehouse now under a temporary space assignment. They would like to enter into a long-term lease. They now, as you know, have their second ship. The warehouse, both that, the red that you see is identifying the warehouse lease area. The entire area consists of 2 bays. It's 18,800 square feet, and it is entirely full. It's full of equipment used on the ships, carpet, any type of inventory that they may need for the ships, and they anticipate needing to use that space on a long-term basis. Right now, they're paying $6 a square foot for the warehouse. The lease is at $6.50 a square foot. They do also have a receiving office that you can see there is identified with a pink roof, and that's at $10 a square foot. Currently, that is what they are paying, and that's what others are paying for those same offices. This would have a commencement date of May 1st, which would coincide with the operating agreement for the vessels, and it would be coterminous along with the vessels as well. The tenant would pay utilities, janitorial services, taxes, and insurance, as well as a common area maintenance fee. Currently in that warehouse also, the passenger bin operations are occurring. You may recall the prior ship to the celebration, passengers would come and they would drop off belongings or goods, they would pack them into bins and they would take them to the Bahamas. The celebration is a little more difficult to do that. They don't have the space beneath to do that. They do still do some bins for passengers, just not to the extreme that they were with the celebration.
I'll move approval.
A motion is made. Properly carried. Second by Walker. All in favor? Any discussion first? Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
I-7.
And finally, I-7, Commissioners Food Service. We will like to go out with an RFP to find out who or what services are out there that can provide food in and around port areas. We will identify in our RFP which areas we are looking at. Please keep in mind that in order for any individual to be awarded this RFP, of course, they will need to have a license, which is at $200 a year, and they must prove of insurance for at least $2 million. That does include also the liabilities. So with that, Commissioners, I ask for your approval so that we can go and have this RFP out in the street within the next few weeks.
Motion for approval.
Second?
Motion is made. Okay. Any discussion?
Can you explain, I don't understand exactly what these people do. Where would they have the food service?
Sure. They will have we happen to have one, it's inside the port, right about here. What they do is they provide coffees and the small donuts and things of that nature. It is very convenient for some of the workers to actually go there and get whatever it is that they wish to eat. We have test market downstairs as the passengers exit, or disembark and exit the building. Perhaps some of them may need water or so on and so forth. What we find is that the parking attendants are also purchasing water primarily. So we'd like to do it and see what else is out there, something more along the lines of assisting us, helping our own people within the port.
I have a question, several questions. Don't we already have someone doing this for us?
No, not really. We have one, as I mentioned, he's a
Yes.
caterer, he's down here.
Beethoven?
No.
This is,
Beethoven used to be downstairs, as I aforementioned 2 seconds ago. That's, he would bring in coffee, donuts, and see what he was selling. I have been in touch with him to let him know that if he wishes to proceed, please look at this RFP going out, and then he has to come in with a license and proof of insurance.
so this is something totally different from what he's doing. This is
No, this will
happening.
be exactly what he has been doing, is providing food service. He brings it in, he's wholesale
So
and
this will be
retail.
inside the terminal?
not inside the terminal, inside by the parking facility.
Okay, where they park, so what he's doing now,
Correct, what he used to be doing,
so he's no longer doing it now?
that is
They
correct.
may do it in the future.
Okay, so he's no longer doing it now, as we
As
talk?
I understand, he has not been, his individual has not come by and established and sell food.
But he can apply for this if he
Absolutely.
decides to?
Him or anybody else.
Okay. Okay, do you think that there's a need for this?
Inside the port, yes, particularly now, maybe down in Southgate, where it's yet to be determined what happens in here underneath where people park and are exiting the building. That is yet to be determined.
Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye, motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
I have no cards from the public, no comment part of the public at all. Commissioner comments, I start on this end.
I'm fine, have nothing.
Commissioner Richards,
I have nothing.
McAlpin,
Nothing today.
Commissioner, nothing? I have no comments also. Mr. Pickens?
Yes, Port Council requests a attorney-client session with asking the advice of the board with regard to pending litigation with LNH. The meeting will be confined to settlement negotiations, strategy session related to litigation expenditures.
You have a date?
Well, we discussed the special, the possibility of having a special meeting earlier today, and we
You need a date?
we need to set that date and then have the attorney-client session at the beginning of that meeting. So I don't know what date was selected.
Yeah, two things, Commissioner. If you recall, we had selected May 3rd. However, we have since learned that May 12th is a very important date, so we may be able to extend it another week after that May 3rd, in the event that we cannot get our own professional team to do an inspection.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
May 10th makes sense. That gives us more time to gather information as we discussed. And accordingly, I would move that we have the attorney-client session on May 10th at 4 p.m. to discuss the same matters we discussed earlier today.
I second that.
The LMH litigation.
If we don't have a lot on our May agenda, maybe we could have our regular meeting on the 10th instead of the 17th. That would be something you could look into, because a lot of times during the summer, there's not a whole lot for the regular scheduled meeting.
So moved.
Just a thought, so that might be something we can do.
We'll see if we can
I can't believe Mr. MacArthur agreed, he never likes to change the meeting.
He didn't agree.
He didn't agree, he said so moved, what's going on? Wow.
All right, so we can look into that.
Okay, I have no problem, I guess since we're all here, it's May 10th, okay, that we can change our meeting.
PM?
I guess we will have the executive session at 3:30, and then our meeting will proceed afterwards at 4. If it's okay?
So I will modify my motion to incorporate the next meeting date, the regular schedule, the monthly meeting to be on Thursday, May 10th, meeting at 4 o'clock, executive session at 3:30.
Thank you.
Does the second agree to that?
I'll second it.
We don't have to vote on
You don't?
that. No, no.
Sure, that's her. Chicken soup.
We don't have to vote. All in favor, just say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. I guess no other, so our next meeting will be held at 3:30 for executive session and regular meeting at 4 o'clock on May 10th. We should meet adjourned.